And welcome everyone to another episode of Beyond the Forecast. I am Chief Meteorologist Michael Stevens, and today's a special episode. And the reason I say it's a special episode because one, it's free week, so we are going to talk about anything and everything that is weather and science. But two, Meteorologist John Gross sat down with the Mackinac Bridge Authority's James Lake and talked about bridge closures. Are they happening more frequently? Why they happen? And what people can know before the bridge closes, and how to get you to where you need to go so you don't get stuck on the south end or the north end of the bridge. And that is a very in-depth and very informative interview that we are going to bring you today in Beyond the Forecast. And then also at the end of the show, we're going to have a segment from our podcast from last week talking about fire weather with meteorologist Haley Fischetti. So before we get into that interview, which is a tremendous interview by the way, let's get into some of our regular things here at the top of the show. Let's start off with this day in weather history. And back in 1988, April 14th, 1988, a very slow-moving disturbance brought Southern California its first rain in 6 weeks. And this rain had nowhere to go, so it pooled and slicked roads up, creating numerous accidents, including a 10-car pileup near Riverdale. So, I mean, you have to remember, if you've been dry for so long, rain can't just go into the ground and saturate it. It has to take time before the ground can accept that moisture. So all that dry conditions just wasn't accepting of the water. So all that rain that came for Southern California that day just pooled and slicked up roads, and a lot of accidents were created. Pretty crazy. But that was, again, this day back in 1988. Now, trivia. Friday we asked you, what is a bright spot on either side of the sun caused by light refracting through ice crystals? Yeah, sundogs. That's where you get the kind of quotation marks on the side. Usually you see them in colder temperatures. We had an episode describing halos and sundogs. But again, it's the crystals on the 20 to 45 degree angle of the sun, I believe it is. Light going through that and refracting and creating those bright spots. It's kind of like, you know, the dimples that you see when somebody smiles. It's like the dimples of the sun. So yeah. Today we are asking you, what is 0 degrees Celsius in Fahrenheit? Is it 20, 32, 0, or 15 degrees? Again, weigh in. QR code right there. Scan it with your phone. It'll take you to where you can vote on your answer, and then we can see how everybody lays. But is it 20 degrees, 32 degrees, 0 degrees, or 15 degrees Fahrenheit? So there you go. All right, viewer photo of the day brought to you by Great Rooms. Today's photo actually shows you a halo, not sundogs, but a halo. This one was sent in from Judy Murtaugh in Cedarville. Check out this halo and the just amazing picture that it is she caught near Cedarville there in the eastern UP. Judy, thank you so much for sending in this amazing photo, but you can see that halo all the way around the sun. Well, halfway, but if it would have been up a little higher, you'd be able to see it all the way around. So thank you so much, Judy, for sending in that amazing picture of the sun and its halo. And again, thank you to Great Rooms for sponsoring that as well. But coming up next, we are going to jump into our very informative and very amazing interview from meteorologist John Gross and James Lake of the Mackinac Bridge Authority, talking about bridge closures, what they can do about them, what they're trying to do about them, and how they arise. We'll have that coming up right after the break. And welcome back, everyone, to Beyond the Forecast. We are going to get into an interview with meteorologist John Gross, as well as Mackinac Bridge Authority's James Lake, about bridge closures. Check it out.
What's probably some of the main things that have stood out in your 12 years with the Mackinac Bridge Authority?
Well, falling ice closures are certainly kind of right at the top of the list as far as memorable experiences. We've had several in the years that I've been working with the authority. Some of them quite lengthy. I mean, we had our longest closure was over 20 hours, and I think sometimes people may suspect that we're just arbitrarily doing things that closing the bridge, but in some ways they're right. I mean, it is really an on or off, black or white kind of decision. If ice is falling under the bridge deck, we're going to close the bridge. And once it stops doing that, whether it's because it's refrozen or because finally all the ice is cleared, we're more than happy to open the bridge as quick as possible.
What would be, obviously, with falling ice, a big hazard to any cars or trucks traveling over the bridge? What would be some other main weather events that you would say that could impact the bridge itself?
High winds are really the weather phenomenon that has the most effect on travelers across the Mackinac Bridge. We have several levels. We have high wind warnings. We have high-profile vehicle closures, so RVs, semi-trucks, those taller vehicles where we'll close the bridge to those vehicles, and then all the way up to a full closure, when winds are sustained over 65 miles an hour, where we don't let anyone cross in those conditions. That's the most common reason for closures, partial closures, and escort conditions. And on a few occasions, we've had such poor visibility or such icy conditions on the bridge deck that we feel that it's necessary to close it to traffic. Those are relatively few and far between.
Sure. And going off of that question, a follow-up to that would be, compared to, I would say, just recently, maybe versus years past, how often would you say that you're having to issue these types of warnings to either, limit traffic that's moving over the bridge, or even in a case where we're talking about inches of ice forming on the cables? How often would you say this has happened recently versus in years past?
Anecdotally, I would say that the freezing ice, the falling ice conditions seem to be more frequent in recent years. It's certainly felt like that for me in the last dozen or so years. Wind warnings and wind closures seem to be generally the same frequency, but for whatever the reason, if it's snow that's stuck to the bridge and has then thawed and refrozen at some point as ice, or these kind of mixed precipitation events, straight up freezing rain, it seems like that's happening more frequently.
I feel like our freezing line has been moving ever so slightly farther north over the past few decades. And instead of snow, more or less, where we get near the straits, now we're kind of tapping into more of that freezing rain and sleet. So going off of just, again, some of these partial closures or even full closures, could you just run me through kind of what a daily procedure might be if you guys are in the process of making that type of decision?
We have cameras, security cameras, pretty much all over the bridge in many different locations. We have weather monitoring equipment out at the midspan of the bridge, so we can keep an eye on temperatures, wind speeds, things like that. Mm-hmm. So our staff is always looking at weather conditions. What we're often finding when it comes to falling ice is we know when it's starting to form on the bridge. So we know from past experience that at some point that ice is going to come down. There have been rare occasions where the ice has melted slowly and not necessitated a closure, but most of the time it comes down suddenly. So as soon as we're starting to see these large chunks of ice come down, hit the bridge deck, we're making the call and closing the bridge and clearing traffic as quickly as possible.
I would follow up with that by asking you, I know you mentioned earlier that it's more of a black and white situation for especially ice closures on the bridge, but would you say you have any sort of defense mechanisms towards that, or are you pretty much at the mercy of Mother Nature at that point?
We are completely at the mercy of Mother Nature. We can look at forecasts, certainly. We can anticipate when winds are going to be higher. We can see when these freezing rain events are coming in. But when it comes to knowing when the ice will actually loosen from the bridge and begin falling, we never know. We can have our suspicions, but they're only suspicions. It doesn't track one-to-one with changing weather conditions either. We can see temperatures begin to fall, and we can expect that the ice will refreeze and solidify and stay in place. But until we actually witness that ceasing of the falling ice, we can't make that call to reopen the bridge.
This is probably a rhetorical question, but going forward, just kind of looking ahead to types of procedures and the way you guys go about making these types of decisions, would you say there are any plans in the making to reopen the bridge quicker or safer, or are current procedures kind of set in stone of how you are going forward with doing these types of closures and delays?
We've only really been tracking the falling ice closures for the last 30 years. We know that there were closures before that due to falling ice, but we've gotten better at knowing what's going on in the middle of the span because of those cameras that I mentioned, other weather equipment. So we're able to maybe respond quicker when falling ice has been occurring. But so far, we haven't figured out a way that's going to prevent that ice from forming on the bridge. It's a giant metal structure in the middle of the weather that we see in the Straits of Mackinac, just like all across northern Michigan here this week. Anything that's metal has layers of ice on it. The Mackinac Bridge is very much like that as well. We've heard suggestions from people, some of them quite outlandish, others, suggesting a different type of paint or perhaps a heated system to maintain the bridge. So far, none of the things that we've looked at would be cost effective, guaranteed to work in those conditions as well, and not risk damage to the structure. So far, we haven't figured out a way to prevent this from happening. In past events, we have tried driving fully loaded maintenance vehicles across the bridge to sort of shake some ice loose. Not really an option in the current conditions. And in at least one incident, we had ice forming on the bottom of the cables. And so workers were able to safely go up on the top of the cables and try to chip that ice away from above. Most of the time, though, the ice is forming on the top of the cable, making it too slippery to access.
And we'll be right back with meteorologist John Gross' amazing interview with the Mackinac Bridge Authority's James Lake. Stay with us.
What would be some good things that you say over the years, education-wise, getting the word out when we have these types of delays or closures?
It is dramatically different. Even 30 years ago, people didn't have cell phones to get this kind of real-time information. So we're trying to keep with the times. We still maintain our AM radio stations with information when people get close to the bridge. We also post current conditions on our website, MackinacBridge.org. We post updates regularly on X, formerly Twitter, at Mackinac Bridge. That's been getting a lot of attention. And then through Mackinac County 911, they've been offering text updates to people. They can sign up for those and receive a notification when the bridge closes and when it reopens. Beyond that, we work with the Michigan Department of Transportation to post updates and warnings on our dynamic message signs along freeways and highways throughout Michigan, so that people, before they even head out, can have an indication. In this case, we've been warning people that falling ice closures are probable. And so we want them to have the information so they can make their decision before they find themselves stuck at the foot of the bridge.
Sometimes motorists and people might not get as good as you feel like you might be getting that word out to people as much as you can. Sometimes you might get people that don't unfortunately get that word in time, and then they get to the bridge and then they find out that it's partially closed or even closed completely, but they still may be impatient. They might have something going on planned, and they're like, well, it's 5 miles. I just need to cross really quick. What would you say to those types of people when we're dealing with these types of situations, especially with falling ice?
we sympathize. I mean, most of the people that work on the Mackinac Bridge live and or work on opposite sides of the bridge. They may find themselves the victim of these closures themselves, their friends and family. So we certainly understand the frustration people have, especially if you're far from home, right? Nobody wants to drive 3 miles from down or 3 hours from downstate only to be stuck, with that short crossing ahead of them. But just like before the Mackinac Bridge was here, and people had to wait a long time for the ferries that would cross, the communities of St. Ignace and Mackinac City have always been very welcoming. Now, in these conditions, we would discourage people from planning on camping out in the community, considering the hardships that they're enduring right now, power outages, short supplies, things like that. But in other cases, people have found those communities to be very hospitable. They can get gas, they can get a meal, they can find a place to rest, maybe get some Wi-Fi access until the bridge reopens.
I would also ask you, I would say more so definitely from a local standpoint, especially if you are a Michigander. But let's go ahead and talk about maybe outsiders who are coming to visit Michigan for a weekend or things like that. What would you tell them to do to prepare if we were potentially looking at a situation that we just had from this past weekend?
Well, every traveler is going to have to make up their own mind. We do our best to provide the information, let them know that, based on historical experiences, the typical average closure lasts somewhere around 5 hours. So if they're willing to risk that, that's a decision they have to make. But we would strongly encourage them, if they can, if this isn't a necessary trip, to consider coming at some other time. We don't want to overwhelm the communities of St. Ignace or Mackinac City either with excessive traffic. And there are limitations, particularly this time of year, for lodging if people needed to stay overnight. So people need to have their eyes wide open when they make that decision.
If there's anything that you would like to add on this specific topic going forward for our viewers to know about.
The men and women that work at the Mackinac Bridge Authority absolutely want to keep people safe and moving across the bridge as efficiently and quickly as possible. We don't take the decision to close the bridge lightly, and we do everything we can to reopen it as soon as it's safe to do so.
Thanks, John. Thanks, James. And that's wonderful information that you should always keep in your back pocket if you have plans of crossing the Mackinac Bridge. Now, coming up next, we take a look at our segment from last week's podcast right after the break. And welcome back, everyone, to Beyond the Forecast. Now, every week we have a live streaming podcast that we do on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. You can catch them live on the Beyond the Forecast Facebook page or the 910 News YouTube channel, my professional Facebook page, or we share it to Haley's as well as 910's Facebook page as well. Now, if you can't catch it live, don't worry. You'll be able to catch it in its VOD, in its entirety, on the Beyond the Forecast Facebook page or the 910 News YouTube channel or wherever you watch or listen for podcasts. Now, last week we were talking about fire weather and fire danger awareness, and this is a section from that. Check it out.
Then 15 miles is minutes compared to hours. And that's where you do just have to hop in your car and go.
And that's where, having a plan in place will be the best thing you can possibly do. That's kind of an idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always going to be a perfect scenario. I'm not saying having a plan is going to be the end-all, be-all perfect situation for you, because some fires can pop up and just engulf and surround. Yeah. And if that's the case, that is where,
do the best you can.
The firefighters are getting to you in a timely fashion, and they usually do.
Yes.
But that's a no-joke situation, and that's what we are trying to spread awareness with fire weather and dry conditions and the awareness of it. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's episode of Beyond the Forecast. We appreciate you starting another week here with us from 4:30 to 5. We'll be right back here tomorrow at 4:30 p.m., going until 5 o'clock to talk more science and weather, because everybody needs to know the science behind the weather. And really just science in general. So for meteorologist John Gross, meteorologist Haley Fischetti, I am Chief Meteorologist Michael Stevens. We appreciate you being here. Be good, stay safe, take care. We'll catch you all tomorrow right here on Beyond the Forecast.